Some mistakes don't ruin weddings. They reveal who should never have been standing at the altar in the first place. Claire Bennett pressed both trembling hands against the marble counter inside the luxury hotel restroom and tried to breathe quietly enough that nobody outside would hear her crying. The ballroom downstairs glittered like something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers. White roses flown in from Italy. A 12-foot wedding cake guarded by security staff like it belonged in a museum. Every screen in the lobby displayed the smiling engagement photos of Ethan Blackwood and Vanessa Sinclair, the city's most photographed power couple. And somehow, Claire felt smaller than ever beneath those giant golden initials hanging over the ballroom entrance. EV forever. Her mascara had already smudged beneath her eyes by the time her phone vibrated again. Another message from St. Mary's Hospital. Another payment reminder. $48,000 overdue. Her mother's surgery could not be scheduled until the balance was reduced. Claire stared at the notification until the words blurred together. She swallowed hard and unlocked her phone, scrolling to her best friend Rachel's contact. The moment the call went to voicemail, Claire covered her mouth as another broken breath escaped her chest. Rachel. Her voice cracked instantly. I don't think I can do this anymore. She leaned back against the cold wall, eyes squeezed shut. Outside the restroom door, faint orchestral music drifted down the hallway while guests laughed over champagne. Vanessa knows about the hospital bills, Claire whispered shakily. She said if I cause problems tonight, she'll make sure I never work another event in this city again. Tears rolled down her cheeks faster now. She wiped them away angrily, but more followed immediately. I tried to stay quiet. I did everything she wanted. I covered for her. I signed the paperwork she gave me because I thought. Her voice lowered into almost nothing. I thought maybe she'd help my mom afterward. Somewhere outside, a group of guests passed by laughing loudly. Claire waited until the footsteps faded before continuing. But she's lying too. Him, Rachel. Ethan has no idea what kind of person he's marrying. Her breathing turned uneven again. I can't let him marry her after what she did. The restroom door suddenly opened. Claire jolted upright, quickly ending the recording before turning around. One of Vanessa's assistants stood there holding a clipboard, her expression impatient. There you are, the woman said sharply. The bride is asking why the piano setup isn't finished. Claire immediately wiped her face and forced herself to stand straighter. I'm sorry. I'll be downstairs in a minute. The assistant glanced at Claire's red eyes and sighed dramatically. Honestly, Claire, if you're going to fall apart emotionally, tonight is not the night for it. Do you realize how much money is being spent on this wedding? Claire lowered her gaze without answering. The assistant walked away muttering under her breath while Claire stared down at her phone again. Her stomach suddenly tightened. The voice message had already sent, but not to Rachel. The contact name sitting beneath the audio file made all the blood drain from her face. Ethan Blackwood. Claire stopped breathing for a second. No. Her fingers moved frantically across the screen as she tried to unsend it, but the loading symbol disappeared too quickly. Delivered. Her knees nearly buckled beneath her. Upstairs, in a private suite overlooking the ballroom, Ethan adjusted the cufflinks on his black tuxedo while half listening to his best man complain about reporters downstairs. His phone buzzed once against the table beside him. Unknown audio message. He almost ignored it. But something about the preview caught his attention. A woman's shaky breathing. Ethan frowned slightly before pressing play. And as Claire's trembling voice filled the quiet room, the expression on his face slowly disappeared. The ballroom at the Grand Crescent Hotel could hold nearly 1,000 guests, but the silence that spread across it the moment Ethan Blackwood stepped onto the stage felt louder than the orchestra that had been playing seconds earlier. Claire stood near the white piano at the far edge of the room, frozen beside a row of floral arrangements. Taller than she was. Every crystal chandelier reflected gold light across the marble floor, while camera flashes exploded from every direction. Reporters lined the back wall. Investors whispered near the champagne towers. The Sinclair family sat proudly in the front rows beneath giant screens, displaying a slow montage of Ethan and Vanessa smiling together on tropical beaches and private yachts. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Claire kept her head lowered as she adjusted the sheet music with trembling fingers. She had spent the last 20 minutes trying not to throw up after realizing who had received the voice message. Ethan Blackwood himself. The groom. The billionaire CEO whose wedding was currently being live-streamed to millions online. She had checked her phone at least 15 times hoping the message would somehow disappear. It never did. And worse, he had listened to it. The small blue audio icon beneath the message confirmed it. Seen. Heard. Permanent. Claire had considered leaving the hotel entirely. But she needed the final payment from tonight's event to send another transfer to the hospital before midnight. Her mother needed medication by morning. So she stayed. Quiet. Invisible. Exactly how Vanessa preferred her. The orchestra stopped playing as Ethan finally reached the center of the ceremony platform. He looked calm from a distance. Tall. Controlled. Impossibly composed in his tailored black tuxedo. But something about his expression felt different now. His jaw looked tighter. His eyes colder. Like someone trying to hold a storm behind glass. Vanessa stepped beside him in a custom white gown that probably cost more than Claire earned in 2 years. The guests immediately began applauding while photographers rushed closer to the stage. Vanessa smiled flawlessly for every camera. Ethan did not. Claire noticed it immediately. His attention was somewhere else entirely. Then the officiant began speaking. Family and friends, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Ethan Blackwood and Vanessa Sinclair. Claire forced herself to focus on the piano keys. Her hands felt numb as she played softly beneath the ceremony vows. Maybe he had ignored the message. Maybe he thought it was sent to him by accident and never listened carefully. Maybe none of this mattered. Then Ethan suddenly spoke. Stop. The single word cut through the ballroom so sharply that even the orchestra froze mid-note. The officiant blinked in confusion. Excuse me. Ethan slowly turned away from the altar. Every guest stared at him now. Vanessa let out a small, nervous laugh, leaning closer toward him. Ethan, but he was no longer looking at her. His gaze moved slowly across the ballroom instead. Searching. Calculating. Claire instinctively lowered her eyes the moment she realized he was scanning the crowd. We are not continuing this ceremony, Ethan said calmly. Gasps erupted almost instantly across the room. Camera flashes intensified. Someone near the front dropped a champagne glass. Vanessa's smile disappeared so quickly it almost looked painful. What are you talking about? She whispered sharply, still trying to smile for the cameras. Ethan ignored the question completely. I want every live stream disconnected immediately. Several production assistants exchanged panicked looks. Sir, we are live with multiple networks right now, one of them stammered. Ethan never raised his voice. Somehow that made everything worse. Then shut them down. Vanessa grabbed his arm tightly enough for Claire to notice, even from across the room. Ethan, this is not funny. He slowly looked down at her hand, gripping his sleeve. Then back into her eyes. I know. The ballroom had become completely silent now except for distant camera shutters clicking nonstop. Claire could barely breathe. Her heart pounded so violently she thought someone nearby might hear it. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The same phone that now contained her voice message. Before this ceremony continues, he said evenly, I want one question answered. Vanessa's face turned pale beneath the ballroom lights. Ethan looked directly toward the crowd again. And this time, his eyes stopped exactly where Claire stood beside the piano. Who made her cry? For 3 full seconds after Ethan asked the question, nobody in the ballroom moved. Nearly 1,000 guests sat frozen beneath the gold lights while cameras continued flashing across stunned faces. Claire felt her heartbeat pounding, so hard it almost hurt. She kept both hands tightly locked together beside the piano bench, terrified Ethan might walk directly toward her in front of everyone. Vanessa recovered first. This is ridiculous, she said with a strained laugh that sounded too sharp to be natural. Ethan, everyone is staring. He did not look at her. His eyes remained fixed across the ballroom, calm and unreadable. I asked a simple question. The wedding coordinator rushed nervously toward the stage holding a headset against her ear. Mr. Blackwood, several networks are threatening legal action if the broadcast is interrupted. Ethan reached for the microphone stand near the altar and lowered it slightly. Then send them my attorney's number. Murmurs instantly spread through the ballroom again. Claire noticed guests pulling out their phones beneath the tables despite the live stream shutdown. Clips were already spreading online. She could practically feel the headlines forming in real time. Billionaire CEO stops wedding mid-ceremony. Vanessa finally stepped directly in front of Ethan, blocking his line of sight toward the crowd. You are embarrassing both families right now. Her smile remained perfectly polished for the photographers nearby, but Claire could hear the anger beneath every word. If this is about stress, we can discuss it privately. Ethan slowly tilted his head. Privately. Vanessa's expression tightened almost invisibly. Yes, like adults. Ethan glanced briefly toward the massive wedding screen still glowing behind them. Photos of him and Vanessa continued cycling automatically. Smiling vacations. Charity galas. Magazine covers. A perfect relationship displayed 20 feet tall above a room full of wealthy strangers. Interesting, he said quietly. Because it seems your version of private has become very expensive. Vanessa's face lost color for half a second. Claire noticed it immediately. So did Ethan. Before Vanessa could answer, one of the Sinclair family members approached the stage quickly. Richard Sinclair, Vanessa's father. A silver-haired real estate magnate known for controlling half the luxury properties downtown. Ethan, he said firmly, keeping his voice low enough that nearby reporters leaned forward to listen. Whatever misunderstanding happened tonight, we can resolve it without creating a public spectacle. Ethan looked at him without emotion. Can we? Richard forced a thin smile. Of course. Ethan reached into his pocket again and tapped his phone screen once. Claire's stomach dropped immediately. No. Please no. Her entire body stiffened when faint audio crackled through the ballroom speakers. Her own shaky breathing echoed softly across the silent room. Ethan stopped the recording almost instantly before any actual words played. But the damage was done. Claire felt heat rush into her face so fast she thought she might collapse. Hundreds of people turned instinctively, searching the crowd for the owner of that trembling voice. Vanessa looked genuinely alarmed now. Where did you get that? She demanded quietly. Ethan finally looked at her directly again. That depends. His voice remained calm. Too calm. Do you already know whose voice it is? Vanessa opened her mouth, then stopped. Just for a second. But Ethan noticed. Claire could tell he noticed because his expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not anger. Confirmation. Across the ballroom, two event staff members suddenly began whispering while staring toward Claire near the piano. One of them recognized her. Claire immediately looked down at the sheet music, pretending not to hear anything. But the whispers spread quickly anyway. The bride's assistant. The girl near the piano. Ethan followed the movement naturally. Their eyes met for the briefest second across the ballroom. Claire expected accusation. Instead, what frightened her more was the complete absence of it. He looked at her the same way someone studies a locked door after hearing noises behind it. Careful. Focused. Trying to understand what had been hidden from him. Vanessa noticed the direction of his attention immediately. Her voice turned colder. You cannot seriously believe some random employee over me. Claire felt every nearby guest glance toward her now. Some curious. Some judgmental. Some already amused by the scandal unfolding in designer clothes beneath crystal chandeliers. Ethan remained silent long enough to make the tension unbearable. Then he stepped away from the altar entirely. Gasps followed instantly. The officiant looked horrified. Vanessa grabbed his wrist again. Where are you going? Ethan slowly pulled his hand free. To find out why someone sounded terrified to send a voice message in my own wedding venue. Claire's chest tightened painfully as Ethan began walking through the ballroom directly toward her. Claire instinctively stepped backward the moment Ethan started walking toward her through the ballroom. The guests parted almost automatically to make space for him, their whispers rising louder with every step. Some lifted phones to record. Others stared openly, fascinated by the collapse of a wedding that had dominated magazine covers for months. Claire felt trapped beneath all their attention. She had spent years learning how to disappear inside luxury events like this one. Blend in. Stay quiet. Never become part of the story. But now every eye in the room followed her like a spotlight she could not escape. Ethan stopped a few feet away from the piano. Up close, he looked even calmer than before, which somehow made Claire more nervous. There was no visible anger in his expression. No dramatic accusation. Just a terrifying level of focus. Vanessa hurried down from the altar seconds later, the layers of her white gown sweeping across the marble floor behind her. Ethan, she said tightly, this has gone far enough. He ignored her completely. His attention remained on Claire. Did you send me that message intentionally? Claire immediately shook her head. No. Her voice came out softer than she wanted. She cleared her throat quickly. It was an accident. I meant to send it to my friend. Ethan studied her face for another second. Claire suddenly became painfully aware of how ruined she probably looked. Red eyes, smudged mascara, exhaustion she had not been able to hide for weeks. Nothing like the polished women surrounding his world tonight. Vanessa crossed her arms sharply. This is unbelievable. She works temporary event staff. You are stopping our wedding over a random emotional voicemail. Claire lowered her eyes instantly. The words should not have hurt. She was used to people like Vanessa making her feel small. But tonight, everything felt heavier somehow. Ethan finally glanced toward Vanessa. You seem very interested in discrediting her before I ask any questions. Vanessa laughed once in disbelief. Because this is insane. One of the reporters near the front suddenly called out, Mr. Blackwood, are you officially canceling the wedding? Camera flashes exploded again. Vanessa visibly stiffened. Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked back at Claire. You said she did something. Claire's stomach tightened instantly. The unfinished sentence from the voice message. She could feel Vanessa staring at her now with a level of coldness that made the ballroom suddenly feel 10 degrees colder. I should not have sent that message, Claire whispered quickly. I am sorry. I was upset. It is personal. Vanessa stepped closer immediately. Exactly. Personal. Emotional. Unstable. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly at the last word. Claire noticed it. So did Vanessa. The tension between them shifted almost invisibly. Tiny details. Tiny reactions. But enough to make Vanessa nervous. Claire, Ethan said quietly, look at me. She hesitated before finally lifting her eyes toward him. Are you afraid of someone in this room? The question stunned her. Not because of the words themselves. Because of how directly he asked them. Claire instinctively looked toward Vanessa for half a second before stopping herself. But Ethan caught it anyway. Vanessa immediately smiled again for the surrounding cameras. This is absurd. Claire felt panic rising in her chest. She could not do this publicly. Not here. Not with reporters recording every second. If Vanessa lost control completely, Claire could lose everything. Her job, the hospital payment, any chance of supporting her mother. Please, Claire whispered. I do not want trouble. Ethan stared at her quietly, then at Vanessa, then back at Claire again. The silence stretched long, enough to become unbearable. Finally, Ethan spoke without taking his eyes off Claire. People who are safe usually do not say that sentence first. Vanessa's expression hardened instantly. You are humiliating me over a crying employee. No, Ethan said calmly. I think someone else may have been humiliating people long before tonight. The ballroom erupted into louder whispers again. Claire could barely breathe now. She wanted to disappear completely. But before anyone could speak again, Ethan's phone suddenly vibrated in his hand. He glanced down at the screen. Unknown number. A new audio file had just arrived. Ethan frowned slightly before pressing play. The recording began with static and uneven breathing. Then a familiar female voice spoke quietly through the speaker. Rachel. Claire recognized her instantly. Claire, if you are listening to this, do not delete your original message. You were right about Vanessa. And after what happened to Melissa last year, somebody finally needs to tell Ethan the truth. The ballroom fell completely silent again. Claire felt all the blood drain from her face. Vanessa did too. The silence after Rachel's recording ended felt heavier than the music that had once filled the ballroom. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed willing to breathe too loudly. Claire stood completely frozen beside the piano while hundreds of wealthy strangers stared at her like she had suddenly become the center of a scandal none of them fully understood yet. Ethan slowly lowered his phone. His expression had not changed much, but something colder now sat behind his eyes. Vanessa recovered first again. This is harassment, she snapped immediately. Someone is clearly trying to sabotage this wedding. Richard Sinclair stepped closer to his daughter with controlled urgency. Turn the phones off, he ordered the event staff nearby. Now. But it was already too late. Guests were whispering. Reporters were texting producers. Tiny clips from the interrupted ceremony had already begun spreading across social media faster than anyone inside the ballroom could stop them. Claire noticed several people openly staring at Vanessa now instead of admiring her. Doubt had entered the room. Ethan looked toward Claire again. Who was Melissa? Claire's throat tightened instantly. Vanessa answered before she could. A former employee who quit over a year ago. Her tone came too fast. Too prepared. Ethan noticed. Claire saw it in the slight narrowing of his eyes. Quit. Ethan asked calmly. Vanessa crossed her arms. Honestly, Ethan, are we seriously doing this in front of investors and cameras? Answer the question. Vanessa let out a frustrated breath. She worked for the Sinclair Foundation. She became emotionally unstable and left after making ridiculous accusations about financial records. Claire instinctively looked down. The memory still made her stomach twist. Melissa Parker had been one of the few employees who tried to speak honestly inside the foundation. Smart, kind, always exhausted. 3 months after reporting irregularities in donation accounts, she vanished from the company overnight. Officially, she resigned for mental health reasons. Unofficially, everyone became too afraid to ask questions afterward. Ethan noticed Claire's reaction immediately. You knew her. Claire hesitated. Vanessa's stare felt like ice against her skin. A little. Ethan waited. Claire could feel the entire ballroom listening now. She trained me during my first month at the foundation, Claire admitted quietly. Vanessa laughed once without humor. Please do not tell me we are building conspiracy theories from overworked assistants. Ethan ignored her again. Did Melissa ever speak to you about the accusations? Claire swallowed hard. She should stop talking. Every instinct inside her screamed to stop. But Ethan's expression remained strangely steady, almost protective despite barely knowing her. And for the first time in months, someone was actually asking instead of dismissing her. She told me. Claire paused as nervous whispers spread nearby again. She told me some donation numbers did not match the public reports. Vanessa stepped forward sharply. That is enough. Ethan finally looked directly at Vanessa again. Is it? The tension between them shifted visibly now. This no longer looked like a misunderstanding between a bride and groom. It looked like two people realizing they no longer trusted each other at all. Vanessa lowered her voice carefully, trying to regain control. Ethan, you are letting emotional manipulation ruin your judgment. And you seem very afraid of simple questions. For the first time all night, Vanessa completely lost her polished smile. Do not do this to me in public. Ethan stared at her for several long seconds. Claire noticed something strange then. He did not look angry anymore. He looked disappointed. Deeply disappointed. As if pieces of conversations from the past were suddenly rearranging themselves in his head into something darker. One of Ethan's executives approached carefully from the edge of the crowd. Sir, the board members are asking whether tonight's merger announcement is still happening. Vanessa immediately turned toward Ethan. Exactly. This affects everything. Claire frowned slightly. Merger announcement? Rachel had mentioned something weeks ago about the wedding being tied to a massive business expansion between Blackwood Holdings and Sinclair Global. Suddenly the pressure in the ballroom made more sense. This was never just a marriage. It was money, influence, power. Ethan glanced briefly toward the executive. Delay the announcement. Richard Sinclair stepped forward immediately. That would be a catastrophic mistake. Ethan's gaze shifted toward him slowly. Maybe I am becoming more interested in mistakes tonight. Richard's expression hardened. Vanessa suddenly reached for Ethan's arm again, her voice softer now. More personal. Please, let us go upstairs and talk privately. We can fix this. Ethan looked down at her hand resting against his sleeve. Then he gently removed it. Not cruelly. Somehow that made it worse. Claire saw genuine panic flash across Vanessa's face for the first time all evening. Then Ethan turned back toward Claire. You said in the recording that she lied to me. The ballroom became silent again. Claire felt her pulse racing. Ethan took one slow step closer. What exactly has Vanessa Sinclair been hiding from me? Claire could feel hundreds of eyes waiting for her answer, but the only thing she could hear clearly was the sound of her own breathing. The ballroom had become unbearably warm beneath the chandeliers, and yet her hands felt cold enough to shake. Ethan remained standing directly in front of her, patient but unmovable, while Vanessa watched with a level of quiet fury that made Claire feel trapped between two collapsing worlds. I should not say anything else, Claire whispered finally. Ethan did not look away. Why not? Claire hesitated. Because people disappear from the foundation when they ask questions. Because Melissa lost everything after speaking up. Because my mother needs treatment I cannot afford if I lose this job. None of those words reached her lips. Instead, she lowered her eyes again. Because nobody would believe me anyway. Ethan stared at her for several long seconds. Then he asked the one question Vanessa clearly did not want him asking. Would you believe her if our positions were reversed? Vanessa laughed softly in disbelief. You cannot seriously be comparing me to a temporary assistant you barely know. Interesting, Ethan replied quietly. You keep describing her job title instead of denying the accusations. Vanessa's composure slipped again. Just slightly, but enough. Around the ballroom, guests had stopped pretending this was still a wedding. Groups whispered openly now. Several executives stood near the back, making urgent phone calls. Reporters lingered close to the stage, hoping for another public explosion. Claire wished she could disappear into the marble floor beneath her feet. Ethan suddenly turned toward his chief of security, standing near the entrance. Daniel. The man stepped forward immediately. Sir, I want access to every financial report connected to the Sinclair Foundation for the past 18 months. Vanessa's face changed instantly. You cannot be serious. Ethan ignored her. I also want records connected to former employees who resigned during that period. Richard Sinclair stepped forward sharply. Those are private internal documents. Ethan finally looked at him directly again. Then I am sure you will not mind transparency. Richard's jaw tightened. Vanessa moved closer to Ethan, lowering her voice. Enough that only nearby guests could hear. You are destroying our families over emotional rumors. Ethan remained calm. No, I am delaying a wedding because something feels wrong. Claire looked at him in surprise. Wrong. Not embarrassing. Not inconvenient. Wrong. It was the first time all night someone with power had admitted that what happened to people like Melissa might actually matter. Ethan's phone vibrated again before anyone could continue. Another incoming message. This time an email attachment. Daniel glanced down at the screen beside Ethan and frowned slightly. Sir. Ethan took the phone and opened the file. Claire watched the subtle shift in his expression as lines of numbers filled the display. Donation transfers. Offshore accounts. Missing charity distributions. Ethan slowly scrolled through page after page in complete silence. Vanessa noticed the change immediately. What is that? Ethan did not answer right away. The ballroom had become so quiet that even the sound of ice shifting inside champagne glasses seemed loud. Finally, Ethan looked up. $3.8 million redirected from children's medical funding into shell accounts over the last year. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the crowd instantly. Claire felt her stomach twist. She knew there were irregularities. But not like that. Never that much. Vanessa stepped closer immediately. That proves nothing. Ethan continued scrolling calmly. The accounts were approved using executive authorization attached to your foundation credentials. Richard Sinclair's face lost color. Vanessa quickly recovered. Anyone could fabricate spreadsheets. Ethan turned the screen toward Daniel. Trace the source. Daniel nodded once and walked away immediately with 2 security staff behind him. Vanessa suddenly grabbed Ethan's arm hard enough that nearby cameras immediately zoomed closer. You are humiliating me in front of the entire city. Ethan slowly looked down at her hand, gripping his sleeve again. This time his expression hardened completely. If these records are real, then you have been humiliating sick children for much longer than one evening. The words landed across the ballroom like shattered glass. Vanessa released his arm immediately. Claire saw something dangerous flicker across Vanessa's face then. Not sadness. Not embarrassment. Calculation. Cold and fast. Ethan noticed too. Before anyone could speak again, Claire's own phone suddenly vibrated inside her pocket. She pulled it out instinctively and froze. St. Mary's Hospital. Incoming call. Her chest tightened instantly as she answered. Hello. The nurse on the other end sounded nervous. Ms. Bennett, I am sorry to contact you during the evening, but your mother's surgery authorization was just removed from the system. Claire stopped breathing. What? The financial sponsor attached to the account canceled payment approval approximately 10 minutes ago. Claire's knees nearly gave out beneath her, because she already knew exactly who had the power to do that. Claire could barely hear the nurse anymore after the words surgery authorization was canceled echoed through her head. The ballroom around her blurred beneath the gold lights while conversations exploded louder across the room. Ms. Bennett? Are you still there? The nurse asked gently through the phone. Claire forced herself to answer. Yes. Her voice sounded distant even to herself. Who canceled it? There was a pause. Papers shuffled softly on the other end. The sponsorship account connected to Sinclair Foundation Assistance. Claire closed her eyes immediately. Of course. Vanessa had promised weeks ago that the foundation would help cover part of her mother's treatment if Claire stayed loyal during wedding preparations. No written contract. No guarantee. Just quiet verbal promises made behind closed office doors while Claire worked unpaid overtime organizing charity galas that raised millions for people richer than she would ever be. The hospital says we need a replacement authorization before midnight. The nurse continued carefully. Otherwise, the surgery schedule may be delayed again. Delayed again. Claire felt something inside her chest crack quietly beneath the weight of exhaustion she had been carrying for months. "Thank you," she whispered before ending the call. The moment the phone lowered from her ear, Ethan noticed her expression change. "What happened?" Claire immediately shook her head. "Nothing." Vanessa answered before Ethan could press further. "If this is another emotional performance, I am done entertaining it." Claire looked at her then. Really looked at her for the first time all evening. Vanessa stood beneath crystal chandeliers wearing a custom wedding gown worth more than most people earned in years, surrounded by reporters and luxury flower arrangements imported from Europe. And somehow she still looked angry that another human being was suffering nearby. Claire suddenly understood something painful. Vanessa was not embarrassed because the truth might come out. She was embarrassed because poor people were making noise in front of wealthy guests. Ethan's voice cut through the tension quietly. "What happened to your mother's surgery?" Claire's eyes widened slightly. She had not realized he overheard enough to understand. Vanessa instantly stiffened beside him. Claire lowered her gaze again. The funding was canceled. Ethan's expression hardened immediately. "By who?" Claire hesitated. She did not need to answer. The silence itself became an answer. Ethan slowly turned toward Vanessa. "Did you threaten her mother to keep her quiet?" Several nearby guests audibly gasped. Vanessa looked horrified. "That is not what happened." Ethan took one slow step toward her. "Then explain it." Vanessa's voice sharpened instantly. "The foundation reviews dozens of medical assistance applications every week. If one was removed, there were probably financial concerns." Claire almost laughed at the lie. Financial concerns. As if her mother's life had become a spreadsheet inconvenience. Ethan studied Vanessa for several long seconds before speaking again. "You promised her help." Vanessa folded her arms tightly. "Because she worked for the event team. I was being generous." Ethan's eyes darkened slightly at the word generous. Generous. His voice remained low and calm, but Claire noticed multiple executives nearby suddenly stopped talking entirely. Even they sensed the shift happening inside him now. "You tied a sick woman's surgery to employee loyalty." Vanessa lifted her chin defensively. "That is not fair." Ethan stared at her another second before quietly asking, "Is it inaccurate?" Vanessa did not answer, and that silence said everything. Around the ballroom, the whispers grew louder again. Claire noticed reporters already typing aggressively into their phones. The Sinclair family members looked increasingly nervous, while Ethan's executives exchanged uneasy glances near the stage. The perfect wedding image had completely collapsed now. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket again and pulled out his wallet. Claire frowned slightly in confusion as he removed a black card and handed it directly to Daniel, who had just returned from tracing the financial records. "Call St. Mary's Hospital," Ethan said evenly. "Authorize immediate payment for Mrs. Bennett's surgery. Full coverage." Claire froze completely. "No," she whispered instinctively. Ethan looked back at her calmly. "Why no?" "Because nobody had ever helped her without expecting something in return. Because accepting kindness from powerful people usually came with consequences later. Because she no longer knew who she could trust." Claire swallowed hard. "You do not owe me anything." Ethan held her gaze steadily. "Maybe not. But your mother should not become collateral damage in whatever this situation really is." Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. "You are paying her medical bills now." Ethan finally looked at Vanessa again. "No." His voice remained terrifyingly controlled. "I am correcting something that should never have happened in the first place." Claire felt tears burn behind her eyes again immediately, but this time she fought harder not to let them fall. Because for the first time all night, the most powerful man in the room was no longer protecting the wedding. He was protecting her. Then Daniel leaned close beside Ethan and spoke quietly enough that only a few nearby people heard the words. But Claire still caught enough to feel her stomach drop. "Sir, the transfer records are real. And there is something else." Melissa Parker did not resign. She filed an internal complaint 3 days before she disappeared from the foundation database entirely. Claire watched Ethan's expression carefully after Daniel delivered the update about Melissa Parker. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else in the ballroom. But something changed completely inside him at that moment. The disappointment that had been building all evening finally hardened into certainty. Vanessa noticed it too. "You are not seriously trusting random files and emotional accusations over me," she said sharply. Ethan did not answer right away. His silence had become more dangerous than shouting. Around them, the wedding guests had transformed into an audience waiting for the next collapse. Nobody was pretending to celebrate anymore. Even the orchestra members sat frozen beside their instruments, unsure whether to leave or keep waiting for instructions. Claire wished she could disappear from the room entirely. Every second inside the ballroom felt heavier now. But she could not stop thinking about her mother lying in a hospital bed while powerful people argued over money beneath crystal chandeliers. Ethan finally spoke. Melissa filed complaints. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly. People file complaints all the time. Then why was her access removed from the system? Vanessa hesitated just long enough to matter. Richard Sinclair immediately stepped in again. "Ethan, enough. We can resolve this privately with attorneys." Ethan looked toward him calmly. That sentence usually appears right before people start deleting evidence. A wave of whispers spread across the ballroom again. Vanessa let out a frustrated breath. "This is unbelievable." Ethan turned toward Daniel. "Lock every foundation account immediately." Vanessa's eyes widened. "You cannot do that. Watch me." The words were not loud. Somehow that made them even colder. Daniel immediately stepped aside to make another call, while several Sinclair executives began arguing quietly near the back of the room. Claire noticed panic spreading through people who had looked untouchable only an hour ago. Vanessa stepped closer to Ethan again, lowering her voice. "If you do this publicly, the merger collapses." Ethan did not react. Billions disappear overnight. Still nothing. Vanessa's composure finally cracked. "Your board will never forgive you." Ethan looked at her steadily. "At the moment, I am less concerned about my board than I am about why charity money vanished while children waited for surgeries." The ballroom fell silent again. Claire felt her chest tighten painfully. No one had ever spoken about people like her mother inside rooms like this. Wealthy donors loved charity when it looked elegant on stage beside cameras. They did not like discussing what happened when real people suffered afterward. Vanessa glanced toward the reporters surrounding the ballroom and immediately changed tactics. Her expression softened instantly, becoming almost emotional. "Ethan," she whispered carefully, "someone is manipulating you tonight. You know how many people would benefit from destroying both our families." Claire recognized the performance immediately. Vanessa always sounded gentler when an audience was watching. Ethan studied her quietly for several seconds. "Then help me understand something." Vanessa nodded quickly. "Anything." Ethan lifted his phone again and opened the original voice message Claire had accidentally sent him. "Why did Claire sound terrified before she even mentioned your name?" Vanessa's face tightened. "Because she is emotionally unstable." Claire flinched slightly at the words, but Ethan noticed. He noticed everything now. "No," Ethan said quietly. "People who are unstable sound chaotic." She sounded careful. Claire looked at him in surprise. Ethan continued calmly, like someone who already knew there would be consequences for speaking. Vanessa stared at him without answering. Ethan stepped slightly closer. "We're there." For the first time all night, Vanessa said nothing at all, and that silence destroyed more than any accusation could have. Claire suddenly felt her phone vibrate again. Another message from the hospital. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Payment approved. Surgery confirmed for 7:30 a.m." Tears instantly filled her eyes before she could stop them. Relief hit her so suddenly it almost hurt. Ethan noticed immediately. "What happened?" Claire swallowed hard. "The surgery is back on." Ethan nodded once. Just once. But Claire could see the tension ease slightly in his shoulders afterward, as if that mattered more to him than the collapsing wedding around them. Vanessa saw it too, and whatever fear had been building inside her suddenly transformed into anger. "So this is what this really is?" she snapped. "You stopped our wedding because some crying assistant made you feel like a hero?" Ethan slowly turned toward her again. "No." His voice remained calm, controlled, final. "I stopped this wedding because I no longer know who you are." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Vanessa stared at him like she had been slapped by reality itself. Around them, cameras flashed endlessly while social media notifications exploded across phones throughout the ballroom. Claire could already imagine the headlines spreading across the country. Billionaire wedding destroyed by scandal. Charity fraud investigation. Public betrayal. But none of that mattered as much as the expression on Ethan's face now. Because for the first time all night, he was no longer trying to save the relationship. He was trying to uncover the truth. Then Daniel returned again, his expression more serious than before. "Sir," he said quietly, "there is one more issue. Several files connected to Melissa Parker were permanently deleted tonight approximately 20 minutes before the ceremony began." The moment Daniel mentioned the deleted files, every remaining illusion inside the ballroom finally collapsed. Guests were no longer whispering politely now. Conversations broke out openly across the room, while reporters rushed toward exits to relay updates live outside the hotel. Several Sinclair executives looked visibly panicked. One of them even left his champagne untouched on the table as he hurried toward the elevators with his phone pressed tightly against his ear. Claire stood beside the piano feeling emotionally exhausted beyond words. Less than 2 hours ago, she had entered the ballroom terrified of losing a temporary job. Now billion-dollar families were unraveling around her because of a voice message she never meant to send. Ethan held Daniel's gaze steadily. Deleted by who? Daniel checked the tablet in his hands. Administrative access tied to Sinclair Foundation executive credentials. Vanessa immediately stepped forward. That proves nothing. Multiple people have access. Ethan looked at her calmly. Did you authorize it? Vanessa hesitated again. Another mistake. Another silence. Claire realized Ethan was noticing every single one now. Richard Sinclair suddenly moved closer, his polished public image finally cracking beneath pressure. This conversation ends now, he said firmly. Any further accusations will involve attorneys. Ethan slowly nodded once. Good. Richard frowned slightly. Ethan's voice remained cold and controlled. Because by morning, my legal team will begin a full forensic audit into every foundation account connected to Blackwood partnerships. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. You would destroy both families over this? Ethan answered without hesitation. If children lost medical funding while executives protected their reputations, then the destruction already started long before tonight. Claire felt the room shift again after those words. People were no longer looking at Vanessa with admiration. They were looking at her with suspicion, with distance. Like social gravity itself had suddenly changed directions. Vanessa seemed to realize it too. Her breathing became uneven for the first time all evening. Ethan, she said more softly now, almost desperately. Please, we can fix this privately. Ethan looked at her for several seconds. Claire expected anger. Instead, what she saw on his face was sadness. Genuine sadness. That is the problem, he said quietly. I think too many things were handled privately for too long. Vanessa's eyes filled instantly, but Claire could not tell whether the tears were real or simply panic finally breaking through control. Ethan turned toward Daniel again. Contact federal investigators tonight. Preserve every remaining file before anything else disappears. Richard Sinclair took another sharp step forward. You have no authority to involve outside agencies without formal review. Ethan finally faced him completely. Watch me. The room fell silent again. Claire noticed something important. Then, nobody from Ethan's company argued with him. Nobody tried to calm him down anymore. Because deep down, they already knew he was right. One of the giant wedding screens behind the ballroom suddenly flickered. For a second, the smiling engagement photos disappeared. Then a system notification appeared across the display. Foundation server backup complete. Vanessa's face lost all remaining color. Daniel looked at Ethan immediately. Sir, the deleted files may still exist in backup archives. Ethan nodded once slowly. Recover everything. Claire suddenly felt overwhelmed by how quickly power could change direction. Hours ago, Vanessa controlled the room completely. Now even her own people looked afraid to stand near her. Ethan glanced toward Claire again, and for the first time that night, his expression softened slightly. Not dramatically, just enough for her to notice. Your mother should not worry about the surgery anymore, he said quietly. Claire swallowed hard. Thank you. The words felt painfully small compared to what he had done for her. Ethan shook his head once. You do not need to thank me for basic human decency. Claire almost cried again hearing that sentence. Because somewhere along the way, she had forgotten people like that existed. The ballroom doors suddenly opened as additional security entered alongside two members of Ethan's legal team who had apparently arrived directly from another event downtown. The atmosphere shifted instantly from scandal to investigation. Vanessa looked around the ballroom slowly, finally understanding there was no way to control the narrative anymore. "You are choosing her over me," she whispered bitterly. Ethan's eyes moved briefly toward Claire before returning to Vanessa. "No." His voice remained calm. "Final. I am choosing the truth over the version of you I thought I knew." Vanessa looked like she wanted to say something else, but no words came out. Around them, the wedding decorations still glittered beautifully beneath the chandeliers. White roses, golden lights, crystal glasses, everything designed to celebrate a perfect future that no longer existed. Claire looked down at her phone again instinctively. Her original voice message still sat there in the conversation thread with Ethan Blackwood. A mistake, one accidental press of a button, and somehow that single moment had exposed an entire world built on lies. Then Ethan's phone vibrated one final time. Daniel glanced at the incoming alert and frowned immediately. "Sir." Ethan looked at the screen. The recovered backup files contained one final item connected to Melissa Parker. An unsent audio recording created the night before she disappeared. And according to the timestamp, it was addressed directly to Ethan.